Just what is the prophetic meaning of lightning when it refers to Jesus Christ's second coming as the Son of Man? This is part 14 of the Olivet Discourse. We've been working through a series on the Olivet Discourse. Jesus is on the Mount of Olives. He's given a prophecy about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, saying there'll be not one stone left upon another of those temple buildings. And the disciples, of course, had two questions. Well, when are the temple buildings destroyed? And secondly, what is the sign of the end of the world and the second coming of Jesus Christ? The Olivet Discourse has two key events that's being talked about here. It's the Great Tribulation, which is that intense time of tribulation prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, and also the events of the last day, the second coming of Christ for salvation and judgment. In our video description, we have many related links to other videos and things about prophecy. Please consider subscribing to this channel. There's a little red button in the bottom right-hand corner. Before we move on, let's take a quick look at overall prophecy and the order of end-time events. We've been in this church age for some 2,000 years. We're currently in the apostasy, which begins near the end of the church age. Then we enter into what's called the Great Tribulation. It's a little season of time that features the Antichrist, the abomination of desolation. The church is now Babylon. And then we have the last day. The Great Tribulation goes on for a little season. Then the last day, a lot happens, and it all happens within a moment. There's the sun, the moon. They don't give their light. Their stars fall from the heavens. The lightning comes out of the east into the west. That's Jesus Christ. It's the second coming, his advent. And we see it's at that time there's the resurrection of the dead for salvation and judgment. All that happens all together on the last day, which ushers in eternity and the new heavens and new earth. In this video, we're going to focus on this lightning that comes out of the east unto the west. What does that spiritually mean? The passage we're going to look at is Matthew 24:27. For as lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now that's the only occurrence of lightning in the Olivet Discourse, but there is another parallel passage that Jesus spoke sometime earlier than the Olivet Discourse in Luke 17, which says almost the same thing. For as lightning that lighteneth out of the one part of heaven shines unto the other part under heaven, so shall the Son of Man be in his day. Now, both of these passages call Christ the Son of Man. That just underscores the fact that it's pointing to the physical return of Christ in his glorified spiritual body. It's a spiritual event, of course, on the last day, but it's also a physical event because it involves Judgment Day and salvation for God's people. We're just going to right up front discuss lightning. When we go through all the passages in the Bible on lightning, we can see that lightning points to judgment. It points to salvation. It's involved with rain, so it points to the latter rain on the last day. It comes out of the east and it goes to the west. Why is that? We're going to look at that. Lightning is like a flash. It's the quickness of all those last day events. The sun, the moon, the stars, the coming of Christ, the resurrection. It all happens in a moment of time. And therefore, all will see him on this judgment day. Sometimes people think this is a physical event where we're going to see Christ and then there's going to be a line at the great white throne judgment and it's going to take some time to go through that. No, all this happens in a moment of time. The lightning represents the quickness and the full extent of salvation and judgment on the last day. It actually has a beautiful meaning. So let's go ahead and look at that right now. So first we're going to look at lightning as judgment. So firstly, lightning we see brings fear. Even when we see lightning in the sky now, often people are afraid. They don't know where that lightning's going to strike. We see in Psalm 97, his lightnings enlightened the world. It gave it light, and we're going to look at that in an upcoming slide. The earth saw and trembled. Trembled has to do with fear. Also Exodus 19 and Exodus 20. These are the passages that talk about lightning being on Mount Sinai when the law of God was given to Moses. There were thunders and lightnings, a thick cloud on the mount, the voice of the trumpet exceedingly loud, so that all the people in the camp trembled. They were afraid. One of the things they were afraid of was lightning. Exodus 20 as well. All the people saw the thundering and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mount smoking. When the people saw it, they removed and stood afar off because they were afraid. Now, Mount Sinai, it was the giving of the law, but it also has a symbolic fulfillment about Judgment Day because people are going to be judged by the Word of God. We're not going to go into that in this video. That's in Hebrews 12. You may want to look at that on your own. Also, we see that lightning depicts judgment on Satan. Luke 10:18, Jesus saw Satan as lightning fall from heaven. That falling is always pointing to judgment, but also the lightning. The word fall, pipto, points to judgment. We remember Babylon is fallen. The house on the built on the sand is going to fall, Matthew 7. So we see the lightning falling from heaven. Satan was judged. And we see that judgment in Revelation 12, which will tag our video we've done on this slide. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. That's a symbol, and we can please look at the video I have posted, but it has altogether to do with the battle on the cross. The dragon fought, and his angels and prevailed not. It points to Christ's victory on the cross. And we see a couple verses later in Revelation 12. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth. Woe because of judgment. Satan's been thrown down. He's fallen from heaven. And the devil comes down because he has great wrath. And we see this judgment on Satan. But we want to understand that the lightning in its simplicity points to judgment. We also see lightning having to do with God's judgment. In Revelation 4:5, out of the throne of God there was lightnings and thunderings and voices, just like on Mount Sinai. We also see the seventh angel sounded, and that word sounded there is literally trumpeted. So the seventh angel, the nations are angry, thy wrath is come. There were lightning, voices, thunderings, and an earthquake and great hail. All those things, the thunder, the lightning, the voices, the earthquake, the hail, all have to do with judgment. They're all different aspects of judgment, and they all have different symbolic meanings, but they all have together with judgment. The seventh angel poured out his vial. These are the seven bowl judgments found in Revelation 15 and 16. The seventh or the last angel poured out his bowl or vial, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, it is done, because it's Judgment Day. It's the last day. There's voices and thunders and lightnings again, and there was great earthquake. Lightning is just one of the things that points to judgment. And finally, we see that lightning brings the bright shining of Judgment Day. It's a shining day. It brings all things to light. We see again in our main passage, Matthew 24:27, lightning comes out of the east and it shines even to the west. That word shine there is the Greek word pheno. It literally means to shine. But it's also used, we see in 2 Thessalonians 2:8, it's the word epiphaneia, which means to shine around. Then shall that wicked be revealed. That refers to the Antichrist, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness, epiphania, of his coming. So we see the Christ coming, there comes beautiful light. All things are brought into the light, and it's Judgment Day. Now let's look at lightning as a shining example. Not only does it bring judgment, but it brings salvation to God's people on the last day. Back to Matthew 24:27, the lightning comes out of the east and it shines. And again, we looked at that word shine. It's the Greek word pheno. It literally means to shine. But it's related to that important word epipheno, which literally means to around shine. Around shine. It's where we get the English word epiphany from. Epiphany. But it's this shining that happens, and that's what Judgment Day is also like. Is a flash of lightning, and it's judgment. But we were going to see in this section where it's pointing to salvation. And we just recall from the Old Testament this idea about lightning. It provides light. It provides shining. Psalm 77:18 and Psalms 97:4 talk about the lightning which enlightens the world. And that's what we see. It enlightens because it brings judgment, but it also brings salvation. But when we look at that epiphany, we find very, very clear passages in the New Testament. It has altogether to do with the appearing of Christ for salvation. Titus 2:13. We're looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing. That word appearing there is that Greek word for epiphany of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ. Again, 1 Timothy 6, keep this commandment without spot unto the appearing or the epiphany, epiphano of our Lord Jesus Christ, which in his time shall show who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords. That's the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's the appearing, it's the brightness, it's the shining about. 2 Timothy 4:8. We will receive on the last day a crown of righteousness unto all of those who love his appearing. All God's people love his appearing, or his brightness, or his epiphany, or his epiphano. In the Greek, we see this appearing of Jesus Christ. We also see, if we look at the Luke 17 version of the lightning on Judgment Day, the lightning lightens out of one part of heaven, it shines into the other part. But here it's not the Greek word to phano, we see it's the Greek word lampo. It means to beam or radiate brilliance. It's where we get the English word lamp from, the simple lamp we might have on our table. It's here in Luke 17:24. And when we look at that Greek word, we see it all together to do with Jesus Christ at the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is an early symbol or type for the final day where Christ is glorified and Moses and Elijah are glorified with him. It's pointing to the last day, but we see his face did shine as the sun. Shine, it's that Greek word lampo again used in Luke 17. We also see in Revelation 1 his countenance was as the sun which shines in its strength. And we see in Malachi 4:2, but unto you that fear my name shall the sun, S-U-N, of righteousness arise with healing in his wings. It has altogether to do with the last day, this brightness, this shining, this great lamp of Jesus' appearance as lightning. The lightning and the latter rain, we're going to look at that just briefly. We did do a whole video on the latter rain, so if you want to look at the latter rain and what it spiritually means, please take a look at the video I have tagged on this slide. But we see that, for example, in Psalm 135, he makes the lightning for the rain. Lightning is always associated with rain. We see in Jeremiah 10, he utters his voice as the multitude of waters in the heavens. He makes the lightnings with rain. We see in Proverbs 16:15, in the light of the king's countenance is life, and his favor or grace is a cloud of latter rain. James 5:7-8, the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth until he receives the early and the latter rain, for the coming of the Lord draws nigh. The latter rain has altogether to do with the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's the day of lightning. But even though it's not talked about in Matthew 24, in other scriptures we know that lightning brings forth rain, and it's that latter rain on the last day. So please take a look at the video if you'd like to learn more about the latter rain. Okay, now let's move to a very important phrase in Matthew 24:27, because it says that the lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west. It comes out of the east and then it shines to the west. So there's a directional aspect here from the east to the west. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. We see in Luke 17:24 that this coming out of the east and to the west, it's spoken in a different way. For as lightning that lights out of one part of heaven shines into the other part of heaven, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So out of the east unto the west, one part of the heaven unto the other. But when we go back to Matthew 24, we see this thing about from one end of the heaven to the other has to do with Christ with his angels, sending his angels to gather the elect from the four winds from one end of heaven to the other. In other words, when this lightning comes out of the east, it shines to the west, it points to salvation, because it points to the gathering of God's people from one end of the heaven to the other. So when we look at all three of these together, we can understand that. But there's really more to that than that, because we see other even more clear passages that the east to the west represents salvation. Psalm 103, as far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions for us. East from the west, it's the furthest extent. It's the salvation of God's people from one end of the heaven to the other. It's the angels gathering the elect. Isaiah 43, I will bring thy seed, and of course we know Christ is a seed, from the east. He originates from the east because he's the day spring from on high. Luke 178, that word day spring there is really the Greek word that refers to from the east. He's that who's from the east on high. And he gathers these from the west. Christ comes from the east and they gather from the west. It's symbolic language. Bring my sons from far and my daughters from the ends of the earth. It has to do with salvation. Also, we know that Christ returns from the east. We've looked in previous videos about Zechariah 14 where he stands, he comes in the east and the Mount of Olives separates north to south, and then God's people go to the east for Christ. Just another symbolic way of discussing the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it has to do with the east. The Son of Righteousness arises. Where does the sun arise? In the east, of course, with healing in his wings, with salvation. He shall go forth and he shall tread down the wicked. That has to do with Judgment Day. The Son of Righteousness is Jesus Christ. He is that shining bright sun from the east. Okay, another very important aspect of lightning is how quickly it occurs. It's a flash in the sky, and that's true also of the coming of Jesus Christ. Again, we see the lightning is referred to, so shall also the coming of the Son Man be. When Jesus Christ comes back, it's like a flash of lightning. And it corresponds to other verses about his second coming. For example, 1 Corinthians 15, 51, and 52. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment. A moment. In the twinkling of an eye. That word moment there, it's the Greek word atomos, where we get the English word atom from, but it's the smallest piece of time. It's not able to be divided or cut. At the twinkling of an eye, how fast does an eye twinkle? It's at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall all be changed. The Jesus Christ, all these events that happen on the last day occur in a moment of time. It's a beautiful thing because it's a quick event. We also see in Acts chapter 1 that the second coming will be a very brief event. We recall that they beheld, the disciples or apostles beheld, they saw Christ taken up into a cloud and they received him out of their sight. This same Jesus was just taken up from you into heaven. So come in like manner as you have seen him go into heaven. It's going to be brief. It's going to be quick. 1 Corinthians 15 calls it a twinkling of an eye. It's a moment. We also see in Matthew 24:30, an important passage which we've looked at before. Immediately after the Great Tribulation, what happens? The sun's dark, the moon does not give light, the stars fall from heaven, and then at that time, not in sequential order, but at that time shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. It all happens at the same time. On the last day, it's the heavenly signs, because that's the sign of Christ coming. And he comes all in a moment and twinkle of an eye. Every eye will see him all around the world because the world is being destroyed. We also see in the Old Testament, judgment occurs in a moment. It's the Hebrew word riga. It means wink, instant, moment. It's used in several passages. Number 16 on Korah's rebellion, which again, the judgment there is a type of judgment day. Separate yourself from among this congregation that I may consume them in a moment. Psalm 6:10, let all mine enemies be ashamed and sore vexed. Let them return and be ashamed suddenly. Psalm 73:19, how are they brought into desolation as in a moment? They are utterly consumed with terrors. All these are either symbolic for, or they are directly talking about Judgment Day. Jeremiah 18:7, at what instant I shall speak concerning a nation and concerning a kingdom, to pluck up and to pull down and destroy it. All pointing to judgment in a moment. Sodom was overthrown in a moment. Lamentations 4:6, the punishment of the iniquity is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom. That was overthrown in a moment, in a wink of the eye, in an instant. Matthew 11:24, it shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee. The judgment of Sodom in a moment is symbolic for the judgment day. We see that in Luke 17. We see it in Jude 7. The day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone and destroyed them all. Even thus it shall be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Judgment day comes as an instant. All this happens in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Now let's look at the last section on lightning being the extent, because it shines all across the sky. It's the extent of his second coming. And we have to remember when we look at this thing about lightning, the last day, these are all symbols that we're reading in the Bible about the nature of judgment day. It comes as lightning. It comes very quickly, as we've just saw. And therefore, in Revelation 1:7, behold, he comes with the clouds. That's symbolic of God's glory. We studied that in a previous video. And every eye shall see him. How can every eye see him if he comes back to Jerusalem? No, it's because Judgment Day happens in a moment, in the instant, quickly. All these things happen together. Every eye shall see him. They that which pierced him, which point to God's people, because Christ died for God's people only. And all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Those unsaved, they're going to wail because they're going to receive judgment. Also, we see this idea in John 5, the hour is coming. There are no seconds in the Bible. When you read the word hour in the Bible, it has to do with the smallest time. The hour is coming, all that are in the grave shall hear his voice. They have done good to the resurrection of life. They that done evil to resurrection of damnation. It all happens in a very short time, in a moment, in the twinkling of the eye. The dead and the living, they're caught up together in the clouds. Those aren't the literal clouds or the physical clouds. They're the spiritual clouds of glory. We also see, back in Luke 17:24, the lightning comes out of one part of heaven, and that word part's not there. It literally means the lightning comes out of under heaven, and it shines to under heaven. It shines all through the heaven. So shall the Son of Man be. Hear attentively to the noise of his voice, the sound that goes out of his mouth. He directs it under the whole heaven, and the lightning unto the ends of the earth. Because it's Judgment Day. It's the final event. All eyes will see him at the same time. It's all symbolic language. The Lord shall be seen over them. His arrow shall go forth as lightning. That has to do with Judgment Day. The lightning refers to the quickness. And the Lord God shall blow the trumpet. All things to do with the last day. But the Lord shall be seen over them. Every eye will see him at the same time. Just a quick summary of this video that we've looked at. The meaning of lightning. Lightning points to judgment, but it also points to the shining of salvation on the latter day. It brings the rain of the latter rain of salvation. It comes out of the east, because that's where Christ returns symbolically, out of the east unto the west. It points to removing sin and salvation. It also points to the quickness of the coming of Jesus Christ on the last day. And the full extent is that all will see him. The lightning flashes because it's Judgment Day. It's symbolic language for it happens in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. The lightning is the quickness and full extent of salvation and judgment on the last day. Please consider subscribing to this channel, and thank you very much for watching this video.